Okay, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. I'm Janine Brinkley, Executive Director of the Peel Center, and we have some great content to share with you today about transitioning your child from preschool early intervention to elementary school. It's a pretty complicated process, and a lot of times families maybe don't know all of the possibilities. So we want to make sure that we cover that with you. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website and with captioning. We were having some challenges with the live subtitles today, so we won't be using those today, but we will have it posted very soon with captions. And today with us, we have several Peel staff members. I'm going to turn it over to Jane Stadnick to get us started. Hope you enjoy the webinar.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go over a few of the guidelines for our webinar today. If you have questions, there is the question pane where you can ask your questions. We'll respond during the webinar to any quick and logistical questions. For any complex questions, we will follow up via email to provide answers. And if you still have questions, please reach out to the Peel Center. We will be happy to answer any other questions. And also, to download today's handouts, there is where the blue arrow is, the handout section. We can only upload 5 handouts, but there are live links on the resource page at the end of our presentation. So transitioning from early intervention from preschool to elementary can kind of be a scary time for families, but also a celebratory time. You know, your child is growing and learning, and he's worked hard, and we want to keep that momentum moving forward. So today we're going to discuss how perspective of adults impact opportunities for students. And this is just how when adults perceive the students coming into their classroom, or you as parents perceive your children, your thoughts and beliefs, or the teacher's thoughts and beliefs on inclusion and presuming competence, how those perspectives can impact a child's opportunities inside of the classroom. We want to talk about the importance of informed decision making in determining educational placement. List tools and options for developing an IEP as a child transitions from preschool early intervention into elementary school. Okay, so we're going to have a poll, and we just really kind of wanted to get an idea of why you joined us today. Does everyone know how to run the poll?
You can either do it on by going to the website listed at the top, pollev.com/JanineBrin240, or you can use your phone and send a text message, and the text message is addressed to 22333. So where you put the person's contact information or phone number, that's you put the numbers 22333 in there, and then in the body of the text message you type JanineBrin240. And then you'll get a reply that you've joined my poll, and then the next text message you send will be your response, A, B, C, D, or E. And as you can see, they start to show on the slide the percentage of people who have responded with each answer.
Okay, I'm going to give this a few more seconds here.
Looks like we have a nice array of folks.
Yes, we do.
Those of you who are professionals who work with families, please feel free to share the information that you learned today, the handouts, etc., and the link, send families to link to the webinar on our website to view it. We'd really appreciate that.
Okay, Anya. We can move over to the next slide. Thank you. This statement is part of the IDEA federal legislation, so the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is what parents already know, and this is what we as parents want everyone else to know. They see, as a parent, we see the benefits that our children, having our children included in school, the benefits it has on other students. In a family unit, the child is already automatically included. So the philosophy is disability is a natural part of the human experience, and in no way diminishes the right of the individual to participate or contribute to society. And over time, our language and practice related to children with disabilities, learning alongside typical peers has changed. It's constantly evolving. So mainstreaming implied the need to be ready. So we're looking at students that maybe were in a segregated or special education setting, and the thought that they need to gain these certain skills in order to be included in their general education peers. Integrated, focused mostly on social skills. So a child being included during art and music and lunch and recess. But inclusion means access to the general education curriculum and learning alongside same-age peers in general education classrooms. And we know that parent involvement matters. There's a lot of research that correlates to higher educational achievement. Children attend school more regularly and enroll in higher level programs, have better outcomes for employment and living independently. So parent involvement matters in being the informed parent, an informed decision maker when it comes to talking about your child's evaluation, their placement, and their IEP. A good way to be involved is through information about your child to the teachers. So we want to focus on strengths and what works. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the student snapshot, and I wasn't able to upload this handout, but this link is live, so you can click on student snapshot on this PowerPoint currently, and it will link you to the PACER student snapshot. It is also on the resource page, and if you have any trouble finding it, please reach out either in our question box, or you can give us a call later on and I can email that to you. But as a parent, you know your child well, and you know what makes him tick and what works to get him engaged, what helps him to stay on task, and what he or she likes and is drawn to. You can tell how he gets ready for bed, how he likes to be supported, or when you need to take a step back. We know what calms our children down when they're angry or upset and what motivates them. These are all important pieces of information to help the school team learn about his strengths and needs. We always say that parents in schools tend to start off on different playing fields. As a parent, I have a 5-year plan. Sometimes schools have a 1-year plan. It's our job as parents to put forth that vision for our child so that the school team is on the same playing field as we are. So we have to begin very early on to think about a desirable future looks like for our kids. Where do we hope he lives? What kind of job? What is he going to do with his spare time to make a meaningful day or week? What we find that's personally fulfilling? How will he stay healthy? All of these things as a whole vision need to be portrayed so we can, as informed decision makers and important members of our IEP teams, this will help our team develop the IEP and make sure that our children are included meaningfully. So if you want to click on the student snapshot, or just think about things that your student strengths, about, take a couple minutes, think about the bullet points that you would put in the student snapshot, because you want to start with, like, even at the beginning of when your child gets on the bus, what motivates him to get on or off the bus. These are all bullet points that can be added to the IEP. So don't forget the importance of extracurricular activities, and this is where you have a chance to know and where to put your input in different parts of the IEP. And we're going to have another poll. This is a word cloud, and it's
Did we lose Jane's audio?
Wow, there's
anyone else?
Lori. Go ahead, Jane.
I was just saying if there's anyone else. Some of these are really good. Go ahead, Lori.
I wasn't sure if we lost you, Jane. Thanks.
I know, I'm having Wi-Fi issues on my end. Sorry, guys.
Thanks. Yeah, you said that in the beginning, so thanks, Jane. And as I understand it, the word determined, because of how big it is, most people use that. Most people use that word to, to say a strength of what their child was. So that's really cool. Very good. And like I said, that word determined is a big word. It's bigger because most people use that word to demonstrate what their child, the strength of their child. Very cool. Very nice. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So I want to talk a little bit about Families to the Max. You may have heard that name before. But we're a network of individuals, families, professionals, and organizations of Peel, Patton, and Hune. We emerged from an educational initiative that helped change the way we viewed and educated our students with the more complex instructional needs. We began with the concept of presuming competence and having high expectations for students. Maybe we didn't in the past. We may have taught to a child based on their diagnosis. So we really changed the adults in the classrooms first. We're a network of individuals who look at a child, through the lens of ability and understand that it's really better to presume a child's competence rather than not. And this includes children with emotional and behavioral disorders. We wanted to make sure that we included also families with those students' needs. Next. So this slide gives us the definition of presuming competence. You may have heard those words before. And presuming competence is a perspective change. It really alters the way that we start the conversation when we think of our students. Some questions to keep in mind when thinking about your child's education, like how do we access the general education curriculum? How, students with disabilities have the right to the same state, district, and school curriculum that's provided to students without disabilities. A question you might want to ask when your student is transitioning, is the content age appropriate? Is the content that my student, is it age respectful? What are your child's non-disabled peers learning? Also, have you created an IEP goal that is aligned with the general education curriculum? And you're going to hear more strategies on how to provide access to the gen ed curriculum to your child later in this presentation. Next. So when we think about the network, we've had some of our beliefs and what every child deserves. I want you to really keep these in mind as your child, throughout your child's educational career. So as a network, we believe that every child deserves to be treated with respect, dignity, and they're recognized as a whole person whose disability is only one attribute of their personhood. Every child deserves to be regarded with the presumption of competence, meaning that if you don't open your eyes to look for it, sometimes you just don't see it. Every child deserves to be listened to and provided with structures and supports, and if needed, in order to be understood. All children deserve to have a means to communicate. That's so important. And often we start out with, the wants and the needs for the child to communicate, but it doesn't stop there. We always have to continue making sure that students can continue to communicate. Every child deserves to be and have access to be taught the same academic content with their same age peers, with their high expectations for learning. Every child deserves to be valued as a person who enriches others through their participation and presence, and who is enriched through the participation of others in their life. And every child deserves to be prepared for a life beyond school with a focus on academics. Students can be more prepared for adult life. So every child also, as a network, we presume has unique thoughts, feelings, and ideas to share. We presume that every child interprets and communicates language in many different ways. And for children whose first language is other than English, communication can even be more diverse. We presume that every child has the ability to learn challenging academic content and skills, no matter the educational placement or setting. Every child belongs and contributes to their class, school, family, and community. We believe that every student can learn academic content, deserves to be treated in age-respectful ways. And as families, we believe all families should have high expectations for their children to learn academic content. And families are partners with educators in making these decisions about their children's learning. And you're going to hear more about Jamie, the parent Jamie, who's going to share this later in today's presentation. we can see what happens when families and educators work together to expand educational opportunities. So I think we have another poll. Oh, I guess we don't. We have it after this. So let's think about what curriculum is. So curriculum includes things like, reading, math, art, science, social studies, and career awareness. Sometimes access to the general education curriculum means focusing maybe on the big ideas, that all students are expected to learn, rather than just maybe some small skills. Keep in mind, like, what do you want the student to remember from a year from now? Might be a good way to think about that. And you should be able to see where the general education curriculum is. Sometimes you may see it on the school district's website. And if you don't see it, you can always ask your teacher or, principal for a hard copy of the curriculum. Okay, here's the poll. True or false? A student can access the general education curriculum with modifications, such as reduced complexity. Would you say that's a true or a false statement? Wow, okay. I'm thinking 100%. Whoever said that, yes, A, it is true. You can do with modifications, such as reduced complexity, and there's a lot of other ways that you can modify the general education curriculum for your student, specific to your student. And again, Jamie's going to talk a little bit more about that. As you begin to think about a plan for your child's transition to elementary school, I want you to keep in mind that special education is a service. It's not a place. It's a service. This means that a family and the school team members think about where the child should go to school and what kind of special education supports are needed. The discussion should begin with the general education classroom first, regardless of the type of preschool or early intervention placement the child attended. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Anna Pacheco.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Pacheco, one of the parent advisors for the PIL Center. So let's talk, we are going to start moving more to elementary school. Could you please change the slide? Thank you. So let's talk about eligibility. So eligibility for preschool early intervention children's include developmental delay or an IDEA specified disability plus the need for a specially designed instruction. So we are going to be seeing in the following slide some comparison between the early intervention system versus the elementary school age system. And for some of you who doesn't know, let's remember that we know that developmental delay is 25% delay in one or more areas of the development of a child, that can be in the area of cognitive, communication, social and emotional, physical, including vision and hearing. So next slide, please. As you can see, school age eligibility, you are going to see again listed all the disability category under IDEA, with the exception that you are not going to see the terminology of developmental delay. So as the team begins to plan for transition, a formal evaluation is completed to determine where the student qualify for special education services under school age eligibility requirement, which do not include developmental delay. However, due to COVID-19 school closures, for this fall, the school can continue serving incoming children from early intervention with the diagnosis of developmental delay and start the process for serving them. We need to remember that the evaluation is a process. The local education agency can review the child record, parent interview for their input, and they can have that conversation. We have to, I think that you have in the chat the link where you can read, you can find more detailed information from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education Services and Early Intervention about evaluation and virtual assessment. So let's continue looking at the differences between the early intervention. I think that you need to move to the previous one. Thank you. Between the early intervention and the school age. These slides show the difference between evaluation timelines in preschool, early intervention, and school age. We know that the initial evaluation timeline are the same, 60 days calendar, right? However, you are going to see that for the early intervention, all students must be reevaluated every 2 years. But when we take a look to the school age special education side, we know that kids, we have to be aware that kids with intellectual disability must be reevaluated every 2 years. Student identified with another category, it will be every 3 years. So it's important for the families to be aware about these differences, especially because you are leading one system that you have some direct support, and transitioning to the school age, you're going to be more leading your child educational process. Next slide, please. So the IEP team, or the individualized educational program, continue to be a plan, continue to be revised and reviewed at least annually. Now the school calendar, we are going to start seeing that it moved from 12-month programming to 180 school days with an option for a extended school year program if the student meets criteria. We have to know and be aware that the extended school year services are not something automatically. The student has to meet certain criteria. And if you want more information about that, please contact us at the Peel Center. Also, a school district determines the entry age. For example, a student may need to turn 5 by the calendar day in order to enter kindergarten. That's something that every family needs to be aware about what is the entry day in their school district, because all it's varies. You can move. Next slide, please. So one of the most important, I think that we have a poll here. But let's talk first about this, what this slide is telling us. One of the important conversations that you are going to have during the process on transition is about the educational placement. This statement appeared within the individualized educational plan document section on educational placement. And it says like this: it is the responsibility of each public agency to ensure that the maximum extent appropriate, students with disabilities, including those in public and private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with students who are not disabled. Special classes, separate schooling, or other removal from the students with disability from the general educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in general education classes, even with the use of supplementary aid and services, cannot be achieved in a satisfactory way. For more information about the full annotated IEP can be found here in the link that you have in your presentation. And this statement emphasizes the importance of IEP teams to begin consideration of the general education classroom with supplementary aids and services as the educational placement. This is true even if a child preschool early intervention placement is not in a typical preschool. It is also important to note that the educational placement section of the IEP occurs near to the end of the document after goals and objectives has been discussed, especially design instruction and related services are being discussed. Assessment has been discussed and planned for that student. All of those components are to be discussed via placement predetermination. I think that this is important piece for the families to understand that conversation and discussion must happen. And I think that now we really have the ball because we want to know where your child receives early intervention services. We want to know if the people in the audience, your child receives special education services at home, the community, in a community preschool, in a special education preschool, in an IU classroom, private preschool, etc., or somewhere else. I think that we got a really fast answer from the audience. So it looks like 100% everybody is in special education preschool. Oh, it's moving.
It says each person answers.
Maybe the audience needs a few seconds more to continue answering. Okay. Okay. So let's 80% special education, preschool, and 40% somewhere else. It would be great if the people who choose letter E can let us know in the chat what that placement is. So we talk about, we are going to keep moving. We already mentioned about eligibility in early intervention versus school age. We look at the differences in timelines. We talk about how important it is to have a conversation about the educational placement after having a conversation about goals, objectives, related services, and other information. So we mentioned that one of the conversations that we need to have is related to supplementary aids and services and least restrictive environment. And this graphic illustrates the idea of the concept of least restricted environment. And I want for you to remember that you have the information about the basic education circular to provide information about least restricted environment, has one of the resources at the end of this presentation. And also you have information about supplementary aid and services handouts in one of the handouts that you have in the system. So you are going to see that the changing component in this slide is the amount of time that the student is including and learning with non-disabled peers. Notice all the students start as a part of a whole. Okay, you can see that blue circle where it says 100% of the time with non-disabled peers in general education. So that's start here, that conversation with supplementary aid and services. So every individualized educational plan team should start with the question of what supplementary aids and services can be provided in the general education classroom to enable these students to learn with non-disabled peers. It is important for the families to understand that this is where the team should start when children are moving into elementary school. Sometimes the IEP teams may not fully consider how the student will be educated in general education with supplementary aid and services, especially if the student is not in a typical preschool setting. That's why you are here, because you want that information and you want to be prepared. There are times, I think that, Anya, the circle can keep moving before changing. The circle is supposed to be moving also. Let's complete the information about the previous one. I'm sorry. I thought that the circle in the slide is supposed to be moving, but as you can see, there's time when the IEP team will decide that the student needs more services outside of the general education classroom in order to provide meaningful educational benefit. However, the IEP team is required to explicitly discuss which supplementary aids and services will be provided in the general education curriculum. And again, we start the conversation about educational placement in the at the beginning in the general education classroom. And then we consider what supplementary aid and services are needed for that child to be educated. There are specific questions about supplementary aid and services that the individualized educational plan team has considered in the annotated IEP. And I think that you are going to have that information also. This process is the same for all students. Everyone starts as part of the whole, but each child least restricted environment is based in their individual needs to receive a free, appropriate public education. That's meaningful educational benefit. We keep moving. Thank you. So IDEA, the Individual with Disability Education Act, also states that a student should receive supplementary aid and services to enable them to be educated with non-disabled children. And you can see that statement on the screen. And also you can see from where in the regulation it comes from. There are a wide range of supplementary aid and services that can be provided in the general education classroom. And again, you have that handout as a part of the information provided for this webinar. So let's talk a little bit about what, more specific, what those supplementary aid and services looks like. Next slide. So SAS, like we call, create a system of support and enable the student to learn and participate alongside with typical peers, regardless of their unique instructional needs and differences. And we have some example, but not limited. That's why I encourage you to read, to take a look to the handout where you're going to get more detailed information. But you can see that some of the sample is planning for team members, modify curriculum goals, even furniture arrangement, social skill instruction, among others. And next slide, please. And also, IDEA does not provide great detail about supplementary aid and services. Pennsylvania uses this framework designed by, and hopefully you're going to understand this, Eckert and Bartlett. I'm sure that is being said in a different way. But this author to organize the full range of supplementary aids and services. As you can see, support that fall within these areas include direct services to students, things that may be considered specially designed instruction and or related services. But go beyond direct services to encompass other types of support that are intended to enable the student to benefit from instruction in regular education class environment. These underscore the unique and critical role supplementary aid and services in supporting access to the regular education curriculum. So you can see there collaborative, instructional, physical, social behavior. Those are the supplementary aids and services framework. And we understand, as a parent advisor, I'm very aware that this information, many times it's not easily to understand for the families, but this is so important for them to get this information at the time to have a productive conversation with the IEP team. Following, I passed the conversation about early intervention transition to my colleague, Jane.
Let me unmute here and get my Wi-Fi back going. So the options for the team to consider when moving into your child's transition from pre-K to kindergarten. Go ahead, Anya. Thank you. So for the rest of the presentation, when it mentions school district, it also includes charter schools also. So I'm going to say school district, but that does include charter. So a child remains eligible for school-age special education if they are eligible for special education in preschool, early intervention, and registered with their school district or charter school, unless a reevaluation determines that the child is no longer eligible for special education. The reevaluation can be completed by the school district, charter, or preschool EI program. So there are 3 options for developing a school-age IEP. Now, we've had some updates due to the COVID and evaluation. So typically, moving from preschool into kindergarten, one of the ways that a child may not be eligible for special education is if he would have a developmental delay. That isn't one of the disability categories under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. However, they are saying currently that we can adopt the preschool evaluation because we can't have in-person evaluations currently, and that they can start that. They can use that evaluation to start special education in kindergarten. Okay, go ahead. Okay, option 1, adopt the early intervention IEP or evaluation report. The IEP team can decide just to adopt the preschool early intervention evaluation and the IEP and implement the IEP as the child's school age IEP. I often see this in kindergarten. They just start out with the same goals and objectives that were in the preschool's IEP. So once this decision has been made by the team, the school district issues a notice of recommended educational placement. That is also available in your handout section. The notice of recommended educational placement, you'll hear us call a NORP, is the form that provides families with the opportunity to agree or disagree with the placement recommendation. You can read more about those parental rights in your procedural safeguards that they hand out. You must sign, agree, or disagree in the notice of recommended educational placement. I get a lot of times families that say, I don't really agree with that, or I agree, or I don't agree, but I don't need to sign that. So, but you do. So if you do not sign it, then it stays as is. So even if you disagreed with it, not signing it they consider that an agreement. Okay. Option 2, you can adopt the early intervention IEP with some revisions. Remember, the IEPs are fluid documents and then should change and revise as your child learns and grows. The IEP team should get together and read over the preschool early intervention IEP, and they can make some revisions. And a lot of times, preschool and kindergarten look a lot different. They're going to be a need for different kinds of support, different supplementary aids and services, and different accommodations than happened in the preschool classroom. The IEP team can discuss those proposed revisions to the IEP, and the school district will issue, again, a notice of recommended educational placement for the family to agree or disagree with the placement recommendation. Option 3 is to conduct a reevaluation. The IEP team can determine that a reevaluation is necessary. And in this, the school district can notify the parents in writing that a reevaluation will be conducted. This notification must occur within a reasonable amount of time after the parent completes the intent to register form. So we don't want this to, if they're going to conduct a reevaluation, once the parent signs the intent to register, so it doesn't have to be registered, an intent to register. If the school district and the IEP team determines that a reevaluation is needed, the parent needs to know ahead of time. We don't want to wait until May 31st to do a reevaluation. But the reevaluation begins with a review of existing data. Families who have children with complex needs should seriously consider requesting a reevaluation specific to school age eligibility and a new IEP designed specifically to be delivered in the elementary school. This would be the best option for that student. Okay. So more on option 3. Once the reevaluation report will be issued, it will have a summary of data reviewed during the reevaluation. It will provide information and if additional data is needed, and make a determination about continued eligibility for special education. If the child is eligible for school-age special education, the school district will convene an IEP meeting within 30 calendar days of the date of the evaluation report. This will ensure a smooth transition to a school-age program. A new IEP will be developed as part of a team. That's you as a parent. And then a NORAP will be issued. Reminder, the NORAP, again, is agreement or disagreement. And your rights are listed under your procedural safeguards information. Okay, next. So a reminder for least restrictive environment. So we've had a lot of conversation about placement. IDEA, the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the Federal Special Education Law, supports a strong preference for inclusive education. Although the word inclusion doesn't appear in the law, as you can see on this slide, one of the key principles of IDEA is the provision of free and appropriate public education. We call that FAPE. In the least restrictive environment, sorry, my Wi-Fi is going in and out here. And that's our LRE. Your notice of recommended educational placement reminds everyone the general education classroom is considered first. Remember, Anna talked about the questions that must be answered inside of the child's IEP, and those are located in that annotated IEP. There are some resources that are already mentioned, and they're on our resource page at the end of this. So every IEP team should first ask the question, how can the student's special education supports and services be provided within the general education classroom? Remember, special education is not a place, but supports and services. All righty, next slide. Lori.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. And I'm glad that you ended on that it's not a place but a service. And families lead the way. Families are the constant in the child's life. They act today to prepare for the future. They see the future. They're there in the future. There's people that are going to help them to see that vision. And families are equal partners in the relationship with educators. And with that, it gives me really great pleasure to introduce our parent leader, I would say, from Families to the Max, Jamie Miller. And she's going to share her family story about transition and what they did to make sure that it was the way they wanted it to be. So Jamie, you can unmute yourself. There you go. Take it away, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Miller, and I'm the mom of Nate, and you can see us in this photo. This is us at a local fair at a local community center, actually, where we're standing on a curb cut that we actually advocated for them to put in so that our son could participate. So instead of having a curb, there's now a curb cut. So this was just a photo of us at that event. Nate is 8 years old and he's just completed 2nd grade. The main things I'd say about Nate are that he's super funny and has us laughing all the time. And he's really outgoing and friendly, and people call him the mayor because he talks to everybody. Inclusion was very important for our family, for his education, his life. But Nate's diagnosis itself may be limiting. His use of a wheelchair once had we had run into someone who happened to be a paraprofessional out in the community, and she assumed that Nate would be attending a school when he got into school age for kindergarten. She assumed that Nate would be going to a school that has access for students with mobility issues and in life skill classes, instead of thinking Nate might be attending his regular neighborhood school. And we also had an administrator when we first started the transition process who assumed that he would also be going to a separate school due to learning needs. So our family started out by making sure that we, the family, were the ones kind of steering the ship. We went into team meetings with our vision for Nate. As well as how we see disability, our philosophy about it, and saying we were not going to be following a medical model or having a predetermined segregated placement. We, insisted that the team, start with considering the general education setting and curriculum, like we're supposed to on our continuum of placements, in the least restrictive environment. And we stress that this is not, Nate's not a problem. It's not Nate's problem to figure out, but it's ours as a team to figure out together how, not if he should be included, but how to overcome barriers in order for him to have access he needed. That he has every right to attend a regular class in a regular school with his non-disabled peers and to belong and fully participate and access the gen ed curriculum with supports that he needs, that he had every right to that, just like any other student. And as a family, we laid the groundwork for that. Next slide. So this is just a photo of Nate last year. This year it had to be canceled in the spring, but this was last year. He was in the science fair at school, and last year he was also in the garden club there, after school club. When transitioning to kindergarten, we let all the evaluators, the educators, the therapists know that Nate had been fully included in a typical preschool, and that in kindergarten, we fully expected him to continue to be included with the supports as needed. We gathered input from his preschool IEP team, which was providing an inclusive preschool experience at a regular neighborhood preschool. This way, the district could be aware of the supports and services that had worked previously in preschool and early intervention. We also got an independent neuropsychological evaluation for him at CHOP, and we asked the evaluators there at CHOP to include in the evaluation how Nate would benefit from an inclusive educational placement, which they did for us. We had the school do it was mentioned before, the supplementary aids and services toolkit. So we had actually, the IU came and facilitated at our request a supplementary aids and services toolkit to problem solve any solutions to overcoming any obstacles to inclusion. So instead of thinking if he could be included, we sat down as a team, considered what's kindergarten going to look like? What's the physical environment, the instructional environment? What are the materials? What's the social environment? And then thought of what might be a barrier for him, and then coming up, problem solving as a team. Okay, what can we do to support him to overcome that? So it's not a barrier to him being in that class. It's just an obstacle to be overcome, and we problem solve around it. So that was very helpful, and we went to many SAS toolkit, supplementary aids and services toolkit meetings and IEP meetings, and came up with a lot of different aids and services and specially designed instruction to help support Nate, as he had been in inclusive preschool. We gave our own written parent input into the evaluation report, into the SAS toolkit, and into the kindergarten IEP. We parents were active in developing goals and the SDIs, the specially designed instruction, the accommodations, the modifications, anything like that. We were active partners in the decision making and equal team members with everyone else on the team. And also, as was mentioned earlier, we focused on academics and then also things like extracurriculars going into kindergarten, things like this. How is he going to participate in clubs? We got aware of what kind of clubs were offered, and we problem solved around how is he going to participate in things like that. So academics, social, and extracurriculars. We were proactive also in ensuring physical accessibility by working with the township. There were no curb cuts outside the school, so the township worked with, I think that it was a state road, and they got an accessible crosswalk added and curb cuts added to the curb so he could access the front of the school. We worked with the school district to add wheelchair accessible parking spots and to enforce those. We worked with the facilities department at the district to make modifications to the playground, the bathroom, the classroom, to make sure they were wheelchair accessible to Nate. And we successfully advocated with the administration to get evacuation chairs for the building's stairwells and make evacuation plans for Nate, and it ended up being all the children in the school district to use during emergency drills or any real emergency, instead of the previous plan had been any children with mobility impairments would be left inside the building during a drill or a real emergency. And we, asserted that Nate has the equal right to participate in fire drills and to be evacuated if everyone else is. So we not only did Nate, but all the children in the district now have evacuation plans, that they're not just going to be left in the building, and the district bought evacuation chairs for every stairwell to make sure that would be a reality. Next slide. This is Nate, I think last year's field day. This year there was obviously no field day, but last spring this was him participating. His PT and the phys ed teacher worked together to, and we parents worked together to make sure that he could participate in the athletics, part of the field day, just like the rest of his classmates, just coming up with creative ways for him to be included. And there's another picture of him at Lego Club, was another club he's belonged to at school. And the school has, as part of our plan for Nate and his IEP, the school provided a one-on-one aid for Nate after school so he could participate in the clubs. And the PTA who ran this club actually helped accommodate Nate by buying bigger Legos that were easier for him to manipulate. So instead of the small ones, these were like the Duplo blocks. So anyway, we shared when Nate started school, and then when we have annual or any IEP meetings, we review a student snapshot, which was mentioned earlier. It just gives a short description about Nate, his strengths, his interests, how to support him, what doesn't work, to help get, and what our vision is for Nate and what we want out of his education. So we shared that student snapshot about Nate. We shared with the team our family's vision for him and his education and his adult life. We shared his strengths and how to leverage them. We shared about his needs and challenges and ways those needs have been met and overcome in daily life at home, out in the community, in preschool. We stressed Nate's equal dignity, value, and worth, and his needs for equality, respect in his treatment and his educational opportunities. We shared with the team information that we had learned at conferences and webinars and through Peel and other organizations. We shared information with the team about inclusion, presuming competence, the least dangerous assumption, which goes along with presuming competence, assuming that a child can learn if we just support them in the right way. We provided information about least restrictive environment and other related principles, and we made clear what we wanted out of Nate's educational experience. We stressed our family's high expectations for Nate and his learning. And then we explicitly, in detail, described our goals for Nate's schooling, the academic part of his learning, of grade level gen ed curriculum content, our expectations for Nate's peer interactions, for his special ed and related services, and our expectation for his full and equal participation in the class and school, so that he had a true sense of membership and belonging in his school environment, which I think we've definitely achieved for him. Next slide. Family input and collaboration was key. We helped to plan a transition to kindergarten that maximized Nate's inclusion in the least restrictive environment. Just as Nate was fully included in a regular preschool with special ed supports and services that came to him, so he went to the typical preschool and the behavior therapist, the OT, PT, speech, vision, hearing. He has a multitude of services with his diagnosis of multiple disabilities. The special educator, they all went to Nate. He wasn't at in a segregated placement, and he didn't have to leave the regular environment preschool. So that continued then in when he made the transition to kindergarten. Those services and supports continued to come to him. So there was continuity when he transitioned, and he had a very smooth transition, way better than we'd even hoped for. Here he is at the school dance. This was actually this year in February, right before everything shut down. There was a sort of Valentine's dance. So this is him and one of his classmates dancing and having fun. And the other one is the publishing club. He published this book. He's published 2 books with the publishing center, where he comes up with stories about his friends and things he likes to do, and he includes pictures and writes it, and then it gets published. So he's a published author as well. Nate is, as I said, he's just finished 2nd grade, and from kindergarten through now and into the future, he's fully included in a gen ed classroom in his regular neighborhood school where our neighbors all go. All the members of Nate's IEP team push into his classroom, whether they push in during math or reading, or they push into OT comes to art, and PT comes to phys ed, and speech comes at recess to work on social skills. So they all come to Nate to support the learning that's already happening there, rather than pulling him out of class or teaching him a different curriculum. He is now 8 years old, and he, as I said, just finished 2nd grade, and he remains an active and beloved member of his classroom and his school community. He receives individualized supports to access and learn from the gen ed curriculum, and to make progress towards his standards-based IEP goals. We make sure that Nate's goals are age appropriate, grade appropriate, and based on the standards for his grade that all children are supposed to be learning. Nate's a hard worker, and he fully participates, from academics to multiple extracurriculars to the fun social events. As I said, writing books through the school's publishing center, performing science experiments for the school science fair. He goes on the same field trips, which is, more planning for things like that, with accessible busing and accessible, seating, or lots of planning ahead of time. That he goes on the same field trips to see plays or go to museums. He participates in the school's field day, belongs to the after-school Lego and gardening clubs. He attends the fairs and festivals and dances and literature nights, just like all his fellow classmates and schoolmates. Soon he'll be on to 3rd grade with some adjustments to his IEP that we, continue to make, as it's a living document. And we continue to make updates as needed to match the increasing challenges posed as the grade levels advance. And for now, he's just enjoying the fun relaxation of a well-deserved summer break. Next slide. And this was us last week. We were on a camping trip at the Poconos in a cabin for a week, having lots of fun out there. So none of what I shared today happened by accident. The things have run smoothly because we parents have been intentional and very proactive about getting very involved. It's taken a lot of work and effort from us parents, including visioning as a family, where we thought about, what do we want for Nate, not just this year or, next year or in 5 years, but kind of, for his whole life. What's our vision for where Nate's going to be as an adult? And clearly conveying that vision to the school district and making sure that that vision is the foundation of Nate's IEP, so that we can not just focus on, little specific skills or short-term sort of goals, but really, how does this relate to getting us where we want Nate to be as an adult, so that that's kind of steering everything we do. It took a lot of work to ensure that what we want is explicitly outlined in his IEP, and that it's a high quality IEP with high quality IEP goals and the full range of supplementary aids and services that he needs. It took a lot of us parents stepping outside our comfort zones and taking on a really active leadership role on his IEP team, which I know is probably a lot of that depends on kind of the culture at your school, how much they welcome parent involvement. And we were lucky so far that our school and our district is very open to that kind of collaboration and partnership and equal team membership of parents, where we're all considered equals. It took a lot of people skills. We had to build rapport and positive working relationships with the school and the district, especially trying to do so with decision makers who were in charge. So not just with his teacher or his general ed or special ed teachers, but the supervisor of special ed and the director of special ed and the director of student services and kind of the high up decision makers, kind of getting them on board with what we are looking for Nate. And it was important to maintain a sort of collegiate team atmosphere with collaboration based on respect and having a positive attitude and staying problem solving in our focus, not trying to not see things as roadblocks, like I said earlier, but just, okay, how can we overcome this? Not just there to sort of complain or, get confrontational, argumentative, but just always stay positive and, keep steering things back to, okay, well, how do we overcome that? What can we do as a team to get around that and that barrier and just, hop over the obstacle? And it took a lot of mutual support and sharing sort of team goals. What we as a team, getting everyone kind of on board with our vision and saying, okay, this is what we all want. How can we help each other accomplish that? Making sure that teachers had the co-planning time they needed. Making sure, his vision teacher has over an hour a week just for material prep time for Nate. Or that's, she sits there and makes sure, and we're increasing it this year, that she has plenty of time to make sure everything's visually accessible. So that's in there, that she has that time she needs because we want to support her. And so we, helped her advocate for that. It took frequent and effective communication with the school and the district to share our expectations as parents, the successes we've had, the concerns we had, to ask questions, and then to be persuasive about any needs or preferences that we've had. And we've been fortunate that we've been successful in that, in pretty much anything that we've wanted. This year we were insisting that for third grade, he not be up on the top floor of the school, for example, that we want him on a ground floor where he could be more easily evacuated. And we were able to persuade them. They were hesitant at first, but they've agreed to that. So having to really, remaining polite, but being assertive and persuasive. And trying to always remain non-emotional and just give a rational justification for why, anytime we say that we think Nate needs something, explaining, this is what his need is, and this is our rationale for thinking that this will help meet that need. It took a lot of forethought and planning to get where we are, anticipating and accommodating for any obstacles to prevent problems before they happen. So if I know there's a field trip coming up this year, or field day, or a club is coming up, well, I'm, as a parent, way in advance contacting the people in charge. There's a dance coming up. He's allergic to latex. What can we do about the balloons? Let's get Mylar balloons instead of latex. The PTA agreed and paid for it. So just trying to address things before they're a problem has helped things be run very smoothly. It took a lot of forethought and planning on our part, but things would be a lot bumpier if we didn't do that. It took a lot of creativity and being able to think outside the box to solve problems. It took a lot of staying aware of what's going on at school, being actively engaged so that we could quickly address any issues when they arise. And that's part of the communication, frequently communicating with school. And also just being informed as parents, knowing Nate's rights, being informed about the law, recent case law. I mean, we've brought case law to their attention, and that has helped persuade them to do different things that we were asking for when they realized the recent case law we brought to their attention. We inform them about, best practices, and give them documentation to support things. So being informed ourselves really helps us advocate, doing a lot of research, and then sharing this knowledge with the district. So essentially, we parents just made sure that the school and district were expecting and planning for Nate's participation and progress. It didn't just happen by accident. We had to make sure that they were just like we were. We had to make sure the district was fully expecting him to participate, and then was planning in advance to make that happen. So we wanted to make sure in advance that things would be accessible and inclusive for Nate. In other words, we helped set him up for success from the get-go. And we couldn't be more proud of Nate and all that he's learned the last few years, and all that he's accomplished, and how far he's come over the years. And we would not change a thing about his inclusion. He's got so much he's learned academically, so much that he, buddies that he's gained socially, and friends, and he's just well known at the school and loved in the community, and just the inclusion that he's experienced in his life, including at school, is we wouldn't trade anything.
Wow, Jamie. Thank you so much. You just really, you, Nate, and Steve continually really teach us. There's just so many takeaways from your story, so many tips, so many things that parents have to think about. And really starting from recognizing the mindset of others based on his disability, to really giving others that support Nate, the vision that you have for him, and how that you continually evolve that vision, and support that vision, and make sure others do that. I just want to say thank you so much. And I want to open it up if anybody has questions for you that they want to ask you specifically. We can start with that, because we do have a little bit of time. So if there's anything anybody wants to ask Jamie and her family. I hear some things. Amazing story, Jamie. It says, Heather says, amazing parental content. It needs to be shared much further out into the world, and frames the conversation and paints the picture for how to support these kids. Here's a question, Jamie. Did you ever use an advocate?
No, we never really needed to. When he was in preschool, when he was transitioning to preschool early intervention, we had considered it for a time, because we kind of were met with a not ideal situation there, where when he went in, he used to be very anxious around other kids his age. And so when he went from early intervention to the preschool, they told us, well, we're not going to recommend an educational placement. He can just stay at home, and we'll send everyone to your house. And we, well, no, we're going to just enroll him. That's what we did. We just enrolled him somewhere. So we were really adamant about that. So at that point, we were considering getting an advocate, but we were able to call, have an IEP meeting called and sit down with everybody and really explain in detail, like, what we need. We can't just start with the most restrictive placement, and we need to, because they had kind of predetermined that placement also. They jumped right to that before we even, as it was noted earlier, the placement decision is at the end of the IEP document for a reason, because you're supposed to first consider all these other things about the child. You're supposed to consider the the data that's been gathered, the parent input, the services and supports that might be needed to access the gen ed curriculum and the environment and peers, non-disabled peers, and then, you know, what kind of related services and all these other things. And then you decide placement last. And they were kind of starting backwards saying, this is what the placement's going to be. So we kind of got informed, got a lot of documents from Peel to help, you know, educate us. And we kind of went in there pretty well informed then and able to articulate why what they were presenting not only wasn't what we wanted for Nate, but it was not really what they were supposed to be doing. You know, they have to really follow, we have to start at the least restrictive, and then, you know, we can't predetermine a placement. So we were able to persuade them without having to get an advocate, but that was probably the closest we were, because we knew that if we started off preschool segregated, it might be harder when we got to kindergarten to have the inclusive placement that we wanted for him. So we, you know, we had him fully included in our lives as a family. And then we got him fully included in preschool, and then it was easier to make that transition when we got to kindergarten. So we've never had, and we've been fortunate in our district that the culture here has been kind of very accepting of parent input and welcoming of that. And, you know, our director of special ed actually said she feels like it's her job is to advocate for kids and families. So we were very fortunate. She actually just left to another school district. So I'm like, fingers crossed that the new director will be like that, because we've had just a really wonderful experience. When you have the administration, you know, that level, that really helps when from the top down, the attitude is towards inclusion and towards collaboration with parents. Like that makes it a lot less of a battle, and where you're not like considering an advocate, because, you know, she was like, I consider myself, that's my job, is to advocate for the kids and the families and make sure that this is the least stressful for you as possible, and that we're getting you, your family, what you want out of your child's education. So, so hopefully that continues. But
well, it sounds like you advocate for not only for Nate, but for the other students. That's what we really see that you do. And Megan says, such an awesome young man, you know, have a great summer, Nate. And then Karen asked, did Nate have a full day kindergarten? And if it was half day, did they add into his day to provide special instruction instead of being pulled out? I think you may have answered that though.
it was a full day kindergarten, which we didn't know how he would do with that, because, you know, I think it's kind of a long day for all kids when they're that age. And we didn't know if he would get too fatigued or how it would go, but we were like, all right, we're gonna, you know, jump right in. And yeah, so it was full day for Nate, just like for everybody. And so they just provide kind of like a co-teaching model where the special ed and the general ed teacher, we made sure in his IEP they have co-planning time, meeting time together. And so, and then also with his vision teacher to make sure that things are visually accessible, so that they have the time to sort of ahead of time make sure things are going to be good to go when he's in class. And then he has a one-on-one aide with him in class to help him as well. So that's how they're able to sort of, they don't have to like fit in any kind of special ed because he's getting the same curriculum as everybody else. It just might have to be accommodated visually, or even some things are modified to sort of the big ideas instead of as many of the little details and skills. So they take that gen ed curriculum that everyone else is getting, and he's in there the same as everybody else, learning and being instructed and doing, you know, group work with other peers and things like that. Just, you know, the same curriculum, same environment. It's just sometimes he has the extra support with him where the special ed teacher is in the room kind of working with him, you know, along with the gen ed teacher, or he might have the speech therapist in there at the same time, or the vision teacher, you know, they're in there with him, helping him work on the same material as the other kids, the same curriculum, the same content, the same skills, so that there's not a need to pull them out and kind of work on something separate, a different curriculum or the same curriculum in a different environment. It all just comes to him at like naturally occurring parts of the day that are the most appropriate. So, you know, like OT comes when they're doing handwriting things, or she comes during art, PT comes during phys ed, speech comes into the classroom, and she also goes out to the recess like once a week to work on social skills. So they try to fit it where it makes the most sense in his day. And that was part of our, what we stress with them is that Nate's there to learn the gen ed curriculum just like everybody else. And that the related services and the special instruction, the special educator, their job is just to do what they can. Like their role is to not necessarily teach some discrete OT skill, like handwriting skill or something. It's to try to facilitate Nate to be doing what's already going on in the class, or whatever learning is already happening. Like that's their role, is to help make that connect, you know, whatever they're doing in class right then, work your way into that and work on handwriting during that, or work on speech skills during that, work on vision during that.
Right.
So that's how they sort of,
that's how they work that in.
yeah, it's not like they, like
Gotcha.
we made sure, you know, we, anytime they mentioned anything like that seemed like they're like, oh, Nate worked on a worksheet, like I would be communicating right away, like, okay, was it the same worksheet as everyone else, or did the OT, you know, bring in a handwriting worksheet? And they're like, no, like we know, yeah, yes, he was working on, while he was doing the, you know, whatever assignment everyone else was, writing a little journal entry, that's when OT worked on it. She didn't have him do something different. So that was very important to us. So it's just worked naturally into like appropriate, naturally occurring appropriate times in the day that makes sense.
Right. Part of the class, right? I see two more questions. One is if you could tell us what district it is, school district. And the second question, and the last one, is how did he do remotely?
The school district is Abington School District in Montgomery County. I think it's IU 23. And the remote learning, that was definitely a challenge. We tried to be very like understanding, because I know that it was very sudden and unexpected, and you know, the district didn't cause it or ask for it or anything, and they were kind of just thrown into this like we were. So we tried to be very kind of understanding about it. Now this year coming up, you know, we're kind of expecting more because they have time to plan in advance, but the distance learning was hard because, you know, at school he has a one-on-one PCA. At school he has a gen ed teacher to support him and a special ed teacher. He has vision support. He has hearing support. He has, you know, OT and PT and speech and, you know, all these different supports. And at home it's just me. So,
right.
you know, I mean, my husband was working from home, so it was just me doing the sort of trying to help him learn from home. So that was definitely a challenge because they didn't really do a great job of, he kind of got the same thing as everybody else. It was kind of almost like the IEP was on hold.
Right.
It was like, when we get back to school, it'll go back to normal. But yeah, like it wasn't ideal. It was just kind of like, here's the same, you know, Google Slides as everybody else. And I kind of spent hours and hours trying to modify it and make it, you know, bigger font and change the pictures and change the concepts and reduce the number of problems to do. So, I mean, it was a challenge for our whole family, I would say, for him and us.
Gotcha. And I'm going to say this. I know there's a lot of people on this webinar that can relate to that, Jamie. And
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. I just want to say that you saw people have the resources. I know some people were having trouble with the links. We can send that out to you if you need that. We wanted just to say thank you. And if there's any questions, other questions that you have, feel free to contact us. And we wanted to thank everyone for their continued participation. Again, please reach out to us. And the webinar should be uploaded to the Peel website and probably within 24 hours. And also, we will be sending everyone an evaluation, and we really value your feedback, and we need those evaluations. So if you can send those back, they'll be sent to you probably within the hour. And but if you can't wait, like some of us, there is a link onto your PowerPoint there. It's the SurveyMonkey. And if you want to do that, please feel free to do it now and not wait. I don't know if there's any other words from Janine or Kala. Anybody else wanted to say anything? I think that's it. Thank you
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much. Thanks, everyone, and have a great holiday. Thanks.
Gracias.